What's going on, everybody? You are live with Osiris, and welcome to a special episode of the Authors Lounge. I am so pleased and so honored to be able to bring on today's guest. Let me not even bore anybody with anything else other than let me just read you the biography of this man here. It's extensive, but trust me, it's worth it. Okay. Our guest is the former president and owner of the pioneer independent bookstore Cody's Books, which was based in Berkeley, California from 1956 to 2008. In 1977, he bought the store and never looked back. Cody's Books helped revolutionize the state of California and the state and the city of Berkeley, of the paperback books fighting censorships, and along with his bookstore, it provided a safe harbor from tear gas directed at anti-Vietnam War protesters throughout the 1960s and 1970s. In between its genesis to its last day, Cody's Books hosted 6,000 to 8,000 book signings. Notable names of those who were part of the book signing event were the likes of legendary boxer Muhammad Ali, the 39th President of the United States, President Jimmy Carter, and the Pulitzer Prize award-winning author Barbara Kingslover. I know I'm going to botch this name. Kings, Kings, hold on, wait.
Salver.
King Salver. There we go. There we go. No worries. Hey, I'm a little choked up right now. He has a resume, so you can't blame me. King Salver, just to name a few. In 2004, 42nd President of the United States, President Bill Clinton, held a book signing event at Cody's Books, bringing in the company's largest attendance and books sold of its 48-year history. Additionally, our guest is a bona fide book agent, author, and a speaker whom you may catch at an upcoming writers event where he bestows his knowledge of the book publishing business for the betterment of the community. Also, our guest is a member of the Association of Author Representatives, which, for those who are not aware, is a not for profit organization of qualified literary agents and dramatic representatives of authors. A man who has been in this business well over 45 years, and he doesn't look it. He looks much younger, but he's been in the game for over 4 decades.
2 years.
Yes, sir. 50? There it is an individual. He's full of treasure, full of knowledge. So trust me when I say you are not going to want to miss what you're going to learn on today's episode. So without further ado, let me present to you the legendary and the kindest person that I have met. Some of those who you may not get the pleasure of meeting him in person like I did, but I hope you do. Mr. Andy Ross. How you doing
I,
today, sir? Yes, sir. What heck of a bio. One heck of a bio.
yeah, well, you make me blush. Thank you.
Yes, sir. So, man, this it's so extensive. I had a list of things that I wanted to ask, but because I just read it, I had some things that popped into mind. So the first thing is, let's talk about that bookstore, right? Get people to kind of understand who Andy Ross is, not even the literary agent or the author, but what that bookstore represented to you and how you were able to keep it sustained for such a long period of time.
Well, I actually started with a small bookstore. I had been a graduate student at the University of Oregon studying German history. And at some point, I kind of went through a dark night of the soul and decided, well, maybe I should own a bookstore, which isn't a particular reason for starting a bookstore, by the way. I don't recommend it.
Yeah.
But it was sort of a fantasy. So I started a store. It was a small store, about 600 square feet, in Sonoma County, in Cotati, which was a small town, kind of a hippie town at the time. And about 5 years later, Cody's was up for sale, and the Cody's family. It was a famous store. When I was in college in Boston, I knew about Cody's. So, and I was 29 years old. So, I was visiting my friend who owned Bookshop Santa Cruz in Santa Cruz, and I was sleeping on his couch, and he was telling me before I went to bed that Cody's was for sale and I ought to buy it. You know, I was 29 years old, and it was sort of this legendary store, and I said no, 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 no. And then the next day I woke up and he said, well, are you going to buy Cody's? And I said, no, 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 no. And then as I was driving home, I changed my mind and
Oh wow.
called up the Cody's. And, one thing led to another, and then I owned it.
That's awesome.
Yeah. And it was, we did some really, really good things in
Hmm.
those. I owned it for about 30 years, which was much longer than the Cody's did. And it was always we were near the University of California, so it was always sort of scholarly and
Hmm.
very political. And I remember at the beginning, we had a politics section, a political
Hmm.
science section that was 4 cases, and we had a business section that was 2 shelves.
Yeah.
That was kind of the way Berkeley was back then.
Hmm.
And there were books on French philosophy, and where we sold 10% of the national sales, or books
Hmm.
about Marxism. Um, and it changed over the years. We started doing events. We didn't do 6,000 a year. That would have been kind of impossible. But we did about 8,000 or 10,000 during the time I was there. We
Oh,
we
okay.
usually had them a couple of times a week though, and pretty much it seemed like everybody who was anybody at some point came to the store. We
Hmm.
had Nobel laureates. You mentioned 2 presidents. We had a couple of other presidential candidates. We had almost every literary figure in America that I knew, and it was a great experience.
Hmm.
At one point, probably the most dramatic moment at Cody's, which seems to have gotten a lot of press coverage, and still does, is we were in 1989. We were selling the Satanic Verses by Salman Rushdie,
Hmm.
and he had a death sentence upon him by the Ayatollah Khomeini in Iran.
Yeah.
And because of the Satanic Verses, he said it was blasphemous, and we got bombed. We They woke me up in the middle of the night, and there had been a firebomb, and it didn't do that much damage. The
Yeah.
firemen did a lot more damage breaking in and putting out the fire. But when we were cleaning up the next day, we discovered an undetonated pipe bomb rolling around the philosophy section, which would have killed everybody. So the police or the
Wow.
fire, the bomb squad came in. It was too dangerous to take out, so they packed it with sandbags and blew it up in the store. And I was standing at the other side of the street watching the store kind of shaking. And then, what do you do after you saw that? We went back inside, and I
Yeah.
said, "What do you want to do now? Do you want to, do you want to keep carrying the book? I mean, it's dangerous." And I said, "Let's have a vote." And they voted unanimously to keep carrying the book, which
That's
I was very proud of.
yeah.
Although if things had gone bad, it probably would have just seemed foolhardy. But we did it, and that was the only. We had a lot of security after that.
Hmm.
The publisher of Satanic Verses sent us a security expert who had spent most of his time working for corporations trying to bust unions, but he knew he understood security.
Yes.
And but the truth is that it was more for the staff to make them feel better, because if somebody wanted to bomb that store again, they could have done it.
No, for sure.
But they didn't. And I'm kind of proud of what we did about that.
That's
So, and book selling is a very dangerous business. So I learned that.
yes, sir. I mean, you learned it in an explosive way, like no pun intended.
Yeah,
That
no, right.
that's one heck of a story, and it kind of speaks to the power of being able to bring in just books, because I think many people don't understand the concept of how powerful a book can be. Some people just write a book and put it out and say, "Hey, I wrote a book," but like, do you understand the true power and within the words that's on that paper, or whatever the format may be? No, so
Well,
for you,
ideas are dangerous. I
yeah.
mean, just ask the people in Florida and Texas. I mean, um, they're scared of books about racism.
Mhm.
It's a dangerous idea.
Yeah.
But it's interesting that we didn't have that problem. You think of Berkeley as sort of a, kind of an intolerant, politically correct place, and we had a lot of politically incorrect books, as well as all of our Marxism and stuff. And I never really had a problem. Nobody threatened to boycott the store unless I took X, Y, and Z off the shelf. And it just wasn't like that, and it's like that now everywhere. Now I have to say that I am a believer in banning books. Nothing sells a book better than a good book banning. And I know that in Florida, when they banned Mouse, which was a Pulitzer Prize winning graphic novel by Art Spiegelman, it had been out for 30 years. It was not selling very well anymore. And as soon as they banned it, it went to the top of the lists.
Oh, wow.
So I was always trying to get one book banned or another, and I still do, but I haven't succeeded so far.
Yeah, what goes into banning a book anyway? Like the obvious answer I would imagine, based off of the topic of what the book is about, but like the politics behind it, what actually goes into, we don't want this book carried anymore.
Well, sometimes it's religion. There actually was a group of people who wanted us to ban Harry Potter because they thought it was about demons. It was some just kind of religious group, and they never did anything. But they put leaflets in the book. They stuffed leaflets in the book about why no one should read it because it's the devil.
That's interesting. And it's funny, like Berkeley, so Berkeley, California. So Berkeley has a special place for me. I'm not from California. I spent about 8.5 years living in California just because of military orders and being in that area. But my big start, or I guess big break, if you will, came from Berkeley, California, when I did the Bay Area Book Festival. And I met a few people out there, Miss Cheryl Bizet-Boutte, Jenny Grossenberger, Jenny Grossenbaum. I always botch her last name, but Jenny Grossenbacher, and another buddy of mine named Mark out there who shared a table with me. But Cheryl is one of the hosts, or one of those who's on the board for the San Francisco Writers Conference. I had no clue who any of them were, but just like how you and I were, just had a great conversation with them, got to know them, and we were just having a good time. And then we just ended up connecting, shared contact information, and one door opened another door, and it led me to the San Francisco's Writers Conference in 2024. And I only went there as just to do poetry. Um, I suppose I made a good enough impact to be invited back to where I met you, and I was on a different, a different platform, if you will, there, and it just opened so many doors. So Berkeley, California, I've met other authors who are from the area or who have been there who somehow, some way, something about Berkeley is magical. It's a magical place for some people.
Well, I lived there for 30 years and I moved to Oakland, but I have nothing against Berkeley. I did, by the way, I had a poetry section and I had a poetry series, a reading series for 30 years. And, we had we had poet laureates from every country. Poet laureate of the United States, the poet laureate of California, the poet laureate of the United Kingdom. They all read it at the poetry.
It's hard. Poetry nowadays too doesn't seem to really stick unless you're a poet yourself or you just have a love for it. But the audience has seemingly there's always a shift where
When I took over that store, the poetry section sold better than science fiction, and then
interesting.
it slowed down a lot.
Yeah, where you're so right now, right? Just given where you are in your career, I say what's the top genre right now in the market?
That's really hard to say. I mean, half the books are fiction,
Yeah.
and fiction is very hard to sell, and it kind of breaks my heart when I do it. Although I just sent out another novel recently, but commercial fiction is, literary fiction, which is mostly what I did, is difficult to sell. And if you ask me what literary fiction is, there's no real definition. It's more like a continuum, and books that are more about language, more about character, more about style are called literary fiction, and books that are more about plot are commercial fiction. But sometimes they overlap. As far as nonfiction goes, nonfiction is very much driven by platform. A lot of it are celebrities. or I say that what is platform? Platform is one of two things. Either you have an endowed chair at Harvard, or you're sleeping with Oprah's hairdresser.
Oh
So
yeah.
it's either you have either you have the recognized expertise to write about what you're writing about, or you have vast access to promoting it. Okay.
Yes.
So nonfiction for me is easier to sell. Most of the books I've sold are nonfiction, just because it's hard to sell anything, but it's kind of easier for me to see if it can find a publisher. Whereas fiction, it's real kind of amorphous. Somebody has to fall in love with it,
Yeah.
and no matter how good it is, and really I reject hundreds of novels a year and work on maybe two of them. So the ones that I have selected are very, very good, and they still don't sell.
Yeah.
It's tough.
That seems like a tough market, even just being an agent. So obviously, I don't have any experience with being an agent or know what goes into it. But when it comes to like to market, because of the variety of books that you represent, how do you tackle it from a marketing standpoint? Let's say, for example, you're dealing with a children's fiction book written in a completely different language. How do you market that same book both in English and in a different language?
Well, agents, publishers usually do the marketing. I mean, agents. I used to think that agents just find a publisher and do a contract, but it's really it's much more than that. Like I have to shape in nonfiction. I have to shape books proposals. A lot of times people come to me with trying to put two ideas into one proposal, and one of the ideas is good and the other idea is bad. So I kind of have to tell them, what the real book is. They have a book in their head, but they don't always know exactly what it is. So
Hmm.
I feel like I earn my commission doing that.
Yes,
For
sir.
fiction, they always need editing. Even if a person is a published author, and even if they have, well, they have to have talent, or I won't be working with them.
Yeah.
But it still usually needs work. They don't have writers don't have the perspective of the reader, and I try
Hmm.
to put myself in the role of the reader. And if I'm
Right.
bored, I tell them I'm bored. If I don't believe the motivation of the character, I'll tell them that. And there's a lot of work that goes into it. And then after that, I try to find a publisher for the book, and foreign rights. Sometimes I deal with foreign rights. Publishers usually want world rights, but if a book
Hmm.
is if it's a big deal, you can sometimes reserve the foreign rights, and the publisher won't get a commission, and more money goes to the author.
I see.
So that's kind of what I do. And once the book is published, well, I still am. I'm kind of the ally of the author. Like I'm there to hold their hand or talk to them about their next project. But a lot of the marketing for the book is done by the publisher at that point.
Okay, okay. And that was my misunderstanding of it as well. I thought maybe there was like a blurred line in between, like maybe they do some of it, but it's just straight
Well,
representation.
there is a little bit of a blurry line because I'm still involved with the author. Within the publishing process, I'm still there.
Yes,
So
sir.
yeah.
Okay, so speaking of publishers, do you work with the big five, or do you work with indie publishing houses, or a mix
Both.
of both?
And it's
Okay.
become really, really difficult. Okay, who are the big five? The big five are Penguin Random House, Harper Collins, Simon and Schuster, Hachette Book Group, and uh-oh.
You said the Penguin Random House, right?
Penguin Random House, right? Yeah.
Okay, good. Okay.
It's the largest publisher in the world.
Hmm.
And they have um, Macmillan, by the way, is the fifth.
No, that's it.
Um,
Okay. Yeah.
and they have each of these major publishers have lots of different imprints, which you would recognize at some point. These different imprints may have been individual publishers, but they've been bought up. So, for instance, Penguin Random House has 100 imprints, and when I submit a book, I can't submit it to more than one editor at an imprint, but I can submit it to, what does Penguin Random House have? They have Random House imprint, they have Knopf, they have Ballantine, they have Crown, they have Viking, they have Penguin. there's dozens more. Um, but there are other publishers. Some of them are comparable to the big five, like W. Norton, for instance, or Bloomsbury Press.
Mhm.
Um, and then there's smaller publishers, and it's become so difficult to get published by the big five now that increasingly, and particularly fiction, you have to go and talk to, deal with smaller publishers, and they don't pay as much money.
Mhm.
Sometimes it's better to be with them, though. I mean, a book that has a potential of selling 5,000 copies wouldn't be of interest to Knopf, but
Mhm.
it might be a very important book for Counterpoint Press, for
Yeah.
instance, which is a great smaller press. It actually isn't that small, but it's not comparable to Penguin Random House.
Oh, right. That's like a conglomerate in comparison
Yeah,
to,
no, it's great.
so how do you even, I guess, come to the idea of, okay, I like this book. How do you choose which agents, not agents, sorry, which publishing house you're going to pitch to?
Well, I'm glad you asked that question because I'm working on one right now. Okay, this is how I choose. So, there is a database called Bookscan, which you can, or no, the database is called Publishers Marketplace. And I
Okay.
would strongly urge people to join it. They can do it for a month for $30. And it's sort of the Bible for people in book publishing. And one of the things that they have is a database of deals, and you can look it up. Deals that happened yesterday. You can look it up by subject. You want to see all the books that are current events or
Mm.
or art, and you can do that, and it'll pop up and it'll tell you like a one-line description of the book, who the agent was who sold it, and who the imprint and the editor was who bought it. So I am looking through Publishers Marketplace today for a new book that I'm working on, and I'm writing writing things down. This is my A list.
Mhm.
This is my B list, and I'm not finished yet.
Yeah.
A lot of fiction is hard to sell, but there's a lot of people looking for it. Literary fiction. And typically, I can send something to 50 publishers, and a lot of them are more, but a lot of them are very, very small.
Yeah.
So it's a lot of work for fiction or nonfiction, and it could take months. I do have an example of a book. It was for a university press, where I sent it out Friday night, and when I woke up Saturday morning, I had an offer.
Oh, wow. Yeah.
but there are other times when it's taken me a year to sell a book. So, and it's gotten since COVID, it's gotten a lot slower, and everybody says that.
Yeah.
A lot of when people are submitting to agents, they're complaining now that they're not even getting rejected; they're getting ghosted. Like they don't even get responses, and
Hmm.
that happens to me. I tell people that sometimes it seems like my job is like my social life in high school. It's I get a lot of rejections. I
Yeah.
get ghosted.
Mhm.
And it can be very frustrating. And rejection is very hard for me as well. Even after all these years, I take it very personally.
I can imagine this is your livelihood. I mean, for so this is it's today's a Saturday. Of course, this episode won't air on a weekend, but it's a weekend. But you're working on the weekend. Your typical day, right? What does that generally look like for you?
Well, I don't exactly have a typical day, which is why my job is sort of fun. But usually in the morning, I'll look and see what's in the slush pile. What's a slush
Oh
pile?
yeah.
Is the unsolicited queries. It's a really sort of a condescending term, but I have to tell you that I have my most successful book. I found the author in the slush pile, and I've been working with her for 10 years. I've only met her once, actually. She lives in Provence,
Hmm.
and she her book has been sold in 13 languages. It's been
Wow.
optioned for a TV series,
Hmm.
and I met her in the slush pile.
That's
So
awesome.
I
Are you? Oh, sorry.
No, I take it very seriously.
Yes, sir. Are you still in contact with her? I know you said for 10 years, so
Oh
you
yeah,
all
she's
talk
my
regularly?
client. She's got a new book coming out in August.
Oh, what's her name?
Her name is Gwen Strauss.
Gwen Strauss. Okay, I gotta look her up. I gotta look her up. That's
Her book
awesome.
is her book is called The Nine, and it's about 9 women. It's a true story about 9 women in the French Resistance. They were captured by the Nazis, put into slave labor, and near the end of the war, they execute an escape from the Reich. They
Yeah,
went all the way through Germany to get to the enemy lines. It's an amazing story.
that sounds movie worthy.
It's yeah, and it's got it's a feminist story too because
Mhm.
it's really all about the kind of sisterhood and how they
Yeah.
together they can work to overcome evil. So it has a really strong feminist theme to it. Great book, wonderful
Yes,
book.
sir. Yes, sir. Well, that's perfect. If so, another question I want to ask, like in addition to the publishers that you pitch to, whether they're the big five or they're of the smaller publishing, for your authors, right? When they come to you, or not, well, when they do a query, right? And I know it's pretty much a generic letter. Like I know you had talked about it pretty extensively during the conference, and
Yeah.
you've been asked this question millions of times. So I'm not going to ask you the same question, but I am curious though on what's like the average length a query letter should be. Like,
Well, that's a good question. I do a lot of workshops on how to write query letters, and I get drafts from authors. They're almost always too long. They
mhm,
almost always are trying to. Most of them are fiction or memoir because that just is. Most of them are trying to give a synopsis of the plot.
mhm,
And agents, we get 20 or 30 of these things a day, and you get lost in these synopses. Try reading a synopsis of War and Peace. You can't do that. So you want to just say at the very beginning, it's sort of three-part structure. The beginning, you just say the facts. I'm seeking representation for my 85,000 word work of literary fiction, blah 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 blah, and you can say it's about 9 women in the French Resistance who escaped from the Third Reich. I
mhm.
mean, just a phrase. Next paragraph, you want to take a short paragraph or two. You can't really describe the plot. You can give a sense of its narrative arc, of its theme,
Mhm.
something about the characters, but you do not want to do a point by point description. Now, one of the things you can say is a synopsis is available at your request. Um, and you might also want to give some comps. Publishers seem to like that. Like this book will appeal to the same readers as blah, blah, blah.
I
And then
see.
at the end, you do a short paragraph about yourself. I've and how long should it be? It should probably be shorter than you think it should be. um,
Yeah.
Sometimes a half a page. I mean, it can be as long as a page, but that's usually not.
Not ideal.
So you gotta, and it's really tricky because every agent I know and every editor I know says that what they're looking for is voice. And
Hmm.
what is voice? Voice is ineffable. You can't define it. You can't teach it. You can't learn about it in a book. But it's really easy to see, usually on the first paragraph.
I see.
So, and that's what everybody wants, but you can't really show that in a query letter.
Right.
So,
So then I can imagine how
um,
more difficult it can be for somebody to even like find a hook to hook the
well,
hook.
and agents don't respond. So what I have been telling people is, and this is kind of expensive, is go to writers' conferences. They're
Hmm.
fun, okay, and some of them, not all of them, actually kind of the agent has to read 5 pages in advance so
Yeah.
they can see what the voice is, and for instance, San Francisco they didn't do that, so I think. I wouldn't say it's not worth it, but I'd say if you're having trouble with your agent, like even responding, go to one of these writers' conferences where they will read pages in advance. I
Hmm.
went to the Santa Barbara Writers Conference and I
Hmm.
had to do that, and they gave me 10 of them, which is a lot of work. 9 of them were no good, and one of them was the best book I'd ever read, or the best 5 pages I'd ever read.
Yeah,
And I really wanted to represent her. Ultimately, she went with another agent because somebody else recognized her talent.
I see.
But if she had just sent me a query letter into the slush pile, I would have ignored it.
I
Well, I would
see.
have given her a thank you rejection, but
Now,
so I think it's
oh,
a
sorry.
good idea, huh?
Yeah, like are there moments, right? I was speaking with Io Io what's their last name? McElroy. There it goes. Io McElroy. Actually just yesterday, and they are they also have a literary agent. But I was asking them, hey, like what was your process? So they explained it to me, but I'm curious. You actually being an agent, right? Are there moments where you actually meet people, let's say at a conference or just somewhere in general, and
Hmm.
you all talking, you realize that they are an actual author and they have work, and the query letter process gets glanced over, and it's like, hey, you know what? Let's just do this together. You don't necessarily need to go through that process. Is that ever the case with you,
Oh
or in
yeah, it happens. I remember once at a writers conference. I don't always find anything at writers conferences, but this book
yeah.
I found at the San Francisco Writers Conference.
Uh,
I went to one of those 3 minute speed dating things, which I think are
yep.
terrible. It's humiliating for everyone. And it's hard to really get an idea of anything at a speed dating. And the writers are really nervous, and
Yeah.
the agents are usually exhausted. But this woman came up to me and she started talking. She was a war correspondent in Latin America. I'd never heard of her, but
Mm.
after 30 seconds, I told her to shut up and call me the next day.
Yeah.
Um, and she was this sort of legendary war correspondent. She was legendary amongst the other war correspondents. She wasn't a household name.
Yeah.
And I've been working with her since then.
Yes.
Her books won awards, and I met her at speed dating.
That is, and that was the thing where in the room that I met you at, right? Is that the well, I met you at the
No,
conference room.
we met for 10 minutes. I mean, that's not speed dating is where you
Oh,
sit down for 3 minutes. It's really horrible. Honestly,
yeah.
don't do it. But I've met two people doing that whose books I got published. But that's
Yeah,
out of 15 years,
for sure.
you know. So it doesn't and it's exhausting.
No,
So for
I
every
I can imagine it's more like a needle in the haystack type of an approach, and so pretty much sticking to the basics is what generally is what's most preferred. It's kind of like a diamond in the rough. If you find
yeah.
somebody such as the one that you have discovered, I'm sure that made her day though, being able to say, you know what, he's telling me to stop. Call him tomorrow. That's good news for me.
Well, I was impressed by her. She was either a hero or she was foolhardy because she was a war correspondent.
Yeah,
And she had a lot of stories to tell.
that's incredible.
And she had the authority to tell those stories too.
Yeah. Now, I wanted to kind of pivot back really quick. A question that I wanted to ask in regards to your bookstore when you had President Bill
Hmm.
Clinton on there, with him having the most success of your bookstore at the time. How did that whole thing even come about?
Excuse me, say that again.
So in regards to your bookstore, there was a question
Yeah.
I wanted to ask in reference to President Bill Clinton and
Yeah.
how him and his book signing, and it just was it was a successful business that you had for a very
Yeah.
long time. But
Well,
how
it
did
wasn't like Bill Clinton just wandered into the store. His
yeah.
book was coming out, and they had arranged a national tour. And
Mm,
the national tour, so I mean, everybody sold thousands of 2,000 copies of the book wherever he went.
yeah.
And it was, I mean, we had a mob outside the door that couldn't come in because he had to leave.
Hmm.
But we did keep it organized. Some people, they did not, at the Barnes and Noble in San Jose where he went, fist fights broke out. I mean, it was horrible. The
Oh,
bathroom got filled up, everything, it was terrible. But at Cody's, that didn't happen. And it was pretty well organized. We had a line, and the line, people went through it, but people waited in line for 24 hours. They brought their sleeping bags, the person who was in the front of the line.
right.
And it was And 2 weeks before, the phone started ringing,
Hmm.
and the phone didn't stop ringing until the event happened. I mean,
That's
like there are four people on the phone all day answering calls.
yeah,
It was it was a it was a tough day.
yeah.
And I remember I don't drink, but I went to a bar afterwards.
You're like,
I
I
had
just had to
three
unwind.
single malt scotches.
I can't imagine. It's just the sheer insanity that comes with when you have somebody of that caliber come to your location.
It worked out great.
Yes, sir.
Um, and Jimmy Carter was a lot easier. Jimmy Carter signed 1,000 copies in about less than an hour, and he bragged about how fast he could sign copies. And it was just like that. It wasn't like he was engaging anybody. But Clinton wasn't like that. Clinton's never been like that, and
Yeah.
everybody who came up there, he'd do his shtick, and smile, and sometimes he'd say a few things, and it went on and on and on, and he was actually a good guy because there was a mob outside that could not get in, and in the end they said, okay, we got to go down to San Jose for the Barnes and Noble signing, and he looked out and he said, I can't, these people are waiting for me, and he just got up, walked downstairs, walked out the door, and started shaking hands, and the police weren't they weren't ready for that, so they had to create a line.
Oh wow.
And it was a little bit wild, but he said, I got to do it. And he got out there, and for about, I don't know how long, 15 or 20 minutes, he
Hmm.
was going around shaking everybody's hand.
That's so
Yeah,
admirable.
yeah, well, I mean, that's the way he was.
Hmm. No, I think that's good. I think there's something that can be taken from what you're saying about that is just continue to be kind. Not that President Carter wasn't being kind, but just doing what he was doing. But it speaks to the personality of the individual. But I really like that idea of, hey, there's still people out there waiting for me. You know what? They're kind of on my schedule, so let me just go and pivot. That's kind of funny though about the police. They weren't ready for it. Like, what do we do? Oh God.
Well, they were there, but they didn't think he was going to be out there, so they had to create I don't know what they call it, them put up ropes and stuff like that.
Yes,
So.
sir. No, that's remarkable. That's such great stories with just how you were brought up in the business and the nuggets that you've been able to provide and the amount of people that you've met and just the knowledge that you have. I guess the biggest thing I want to ask, I'll ask just a couple more questions before I let you go. So thank you again for this extensive period of time that you stayed on. What drew you? Because I know once the bookstore closed down you became an agent, but what exactly was it that drew you to become an agent? Like, why I want to represent
I,
people.
I didn't know what I was going to do. Cody's closed because everybody had started buying books online, and we couldn't. Our business had declined so much. We were a big store, so we had a lot of overhead. We just couldn't keep in business. So I didn't know what I was going to do. I've been a bookseller all my life. I
Hmm.
had studied German history before that. So um, I just I thought I'd be sacking groceries at Safeway. I really had no experience or training or much of anything. And one night I just woke up and said, maybe I'll be an agent. That sounds like fun. And I didn't know anything because it was at the other end of the food chain. I'd always been in sales, and agents were always before the book was published, and I was there after the book was published.
Yeah.
So I kind of didn't know what I was doing, and I faked it for a while, and now I am an experienced agent.
Yes,
So
sir. Yeah, but
sometimes I
hey,
still feel like I'm faking it, but you know how it is.
hey. Sometimes you just gotta put on the face and see what happens with it. Or take a
Yeah,
chance.
right. I
You just took a
know.
chance on yourself. That's exactly what that sounds like. You just took a chance, and I think that's one of the overall messages that I tend to like to promote to people in general, whether they're just teenagers or they're adults. Is you got to take a chance. Yeah, I've seen far too many people, especially like in the military, where they're locked in and trapped behind a uniform. They don't know how to operate outside of it, and so I try to encourage people to just dig really deep and find out what you truly love. For me, I knew that this was what I wanted to do, and this venue of being in the book publishing business many years ago, and I finally just took a chance back in 2020, and I just started to study the business. Before I even wrote the book, I just studied the business aspect just to get some knowledge. And then I published my first book in 2021 when my children were born, and then everything else has been a snowball effect, and so many great opportunities have come. Though for you, sir, right, you've met self-published authors and traditionally published authors, given where you are now. Do you feel that people that are self-published can be just as successful as traditionally published authors, or like, what are your thoughts on those, sir?
Well, first of all, I'm a self-published author. I published a book called The Literary Agent's Guide to Writing a Nonfiction Book Proposal, which I
Ah,
strongly recommend. It's only 100 pages long, and it is generally acknowledged to be the best book on the subject. But it is self-published. If you are self-publishing, you have to promote it. You don't have a publisher and their publicity department, behind you. I'm too busy to promote my book. I usually give it away when I to somebody who I want to be my client and tell them they've got to write a good book proposal. And by the way, you read this book. So there's 5 or 6 million self-published books on the Amazon database.
mhm.
Most of them don't sell very well.
Right.
But that's also true of large publishers. If they lose money on 3/4 of the books they publish, and it's only they make a lot of money on a bestseller, and that's what allows them to publish all these other books that sell, a few thousand copies.
Hmm.
So, but self-publishing is kind of a challenge, but it's usually people do it when they don't have anywhere else to go.
I
And
see.
I know a lot of my clients, when I haven't been able to publish their book, they've gone the self-publishing route. Some of them have done okay.
Yeah, no, for sure. And I guess ultimately too is a matter of just sheer will and determination on how you can make your book successful. Because to my knowledge, right, and of course, I'm sure you know this, but just in the things that I've heard, just in talking to other authors who are trad published or who are or self-published, is that the marketing doesn't necessarily change unless you are some sort of a public figure or celebrity or a big time influencer, to where if you get trap published, they'll do the marketing because they know they can drive in a great deal of revenue. Like for example,
Right.
when Bill Clinton came to your store, they didn't necessarily I'm sure there didn't need to be much promotions that would go into it because of who he was as a person. But let's say if it was just like a random person who just became a self-published author 2 weeks ago, they would have to do the marketing on their own. That's kind of where I'm getting at. And so you had mentioned something earlier, sir, about conferences, about, hey, it might be a bit expensive, but go to the conferences. And I agree for people to invest and go and attend conferences. But for you, being in California, I once heard you need to go where the action is, right? Go where the action is so you can turn it to a butterfly, for lack of for better terms. What are some good conferences for writers to attend?
Well, here's if you want to do the research, go to the website of poets and writers, and they have this long database. It's sort of like a classified ad thing, but they have links to and there's like 100 conferences. Some of them are international. The one I like is the Kauai Writers Conference. They have lots of agents there. They never have trouble getting the A-list authors, and if it doesn't work out, you're still in paradise.
Yeah.
So, and they have some great master classes for the conference.
Yes,
So I
sir.
really like the Kauai conference.
Because
I've
Kawhi
been. I'm
Conference.
not going to be there this year, but I've been there for the last 10 years. I'll probably be going back. I don't know, next year.
And where's that
Oh, can
located?
I can I plug my workshop?
Yeah, go
Is that
ahead.
okay? Yeah,
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 plug
yeah.
it.
Okay. So Linda Watanabe McFerrin and I, Linda's a book coach, a novelist. We are going to organizing a 6-day writing intensive workshop in Provence at the end of September. We've rented an 11-bedroom country manor surrounded by olive trees. We did it in 2023 and everybody loved it. Some of them are coming back. And we still have a couple of slots left. And if you are interested, email me. Okay, my email is easy to find. You can look me up on Google. I have a website which includes my email. And we would love to have you, I think.
Oh yeah. And I'll make sure I'll link that information too in the bio of this.
That's great. Thank you so much. Yeah.
Of course. Hey, well, looks like we're coming up short on me keeping you. I know I said 30 minutes. It looks like it's 45 minutes. So I
Yeah,
appreciate
that's
that.
okay.
So, yes,
Right.
sir. Okay, so let's see. That gets the final question. Oh wait, that location you said, the which conference you said, the one that you're going to probably go to next year. Where is that located?
Oh, Kauai, the
Kauai.
island
Oh,
of Kauai on the state of Hawaii.
oh, Kauai. Okay, okay. Kauai in Hawaii. Okay.
Excellent. But there's lots of other conferences all over the country.
Yes, sir.
And you should just do your research. I've gone to one in Alaska, been in Canada, been in Mexico, San Miguel de Allende, which is also an excellent conference.
Uh,
Um, and anywhere you go, but go to a nice one. Don't go to the one in the airport hotel in Atlanta. I was there too. It just, go to a nice place.
yes, sir. That's great advice. I'm gonna take that to heart. This recording is over, I just want to ask you a couple of questions, but like offline. Um, but okay, well, you already mentioned where people can find you, and so what's the one thing, I guess, some advice you can give like a new writer as a whole? What advice can you share for them to start their journey?
There's a lot of rejection, and I don't want to be depressing, but there is. And you have to be um, resilient. It's not about you if you get rejected. If you have an agent, you're good, and you're probably good enough to get published. But it doesn't always happen. So just be aware of that. Don't give up. And if at some point, if it isn't working out, move on to the next project.
Oh, perfect. That right there, resilience, just being resilient and really just believing in yourself. Rejection is going to happen regardless.
It just
I think,
happens. It's not
yes,
about
sir.
you.
Exactly. And I think if people are of the mindset of, I'm going to be rejected, they should probably not pursue anything.
Well, they will be, but I mean, typically when I have sold a book, I will get 25 rejections and one editor, sometimes two, who say, "I love this book." You know,
Mhm,
my most famous client is Daniel Ellsberg, who was an
mhm,
American hero. He was responsible for the ending of the Vietnam War, and he
mhm,
just died. May he rest in peace. He got 15 rejections when I tried to sell his book. I
mhm.
got two offers, and he's a famous character. He was famous then. He's famous now. They've
Yes,
done
sir.
movies about it. They've done books about it.
Yeah, and that speaks to your character too, sir, about just the resilience because many authors may just feel like, hey, once they get an agent, it's a done deal. But the agent herself or himself, they have to also be resilient in the pursuit to get the deal. And so I just wanted to give you your flowers and that and just say that I think is wonderful what you do for the community and the voice that you provide for people and just the joy that it is even speaking with you. I knew when I met you, you just had really good vibes and just a naturally funny guy as well, and someone that is just full of knowledge that I feel I can reach out to if I just have any sort of question or just need some sort of guidance. Just a genuinely kind person, and I really do appreciate you not only coming on this platform but really just in talking to me and just just being respectful. There's a lot of people who aren't respectful, given that there's where their status is, and some people are just condescending and disrespectful and just rude individuals. And you're not of my status, so don't talk to me. But you're nothing like that, and you could be if you wanted to, but you're just not like that. And so I really, really, from the bottom of my heart, just want to say thank you so much for your time, sir, and thank you so much for this wisdom that you're providing. I really believe what you've been saying is going to be so helpful and inspirational to people who listen to what you're going to say. And I will break this episode into snippets and put the ones that I really feel are the nuggets in short format while at the same time having a full video because there's things that you said here that will last a lifetime. So thank you so much.
Thank you. It has been an honor to be here.
Yes, sir. Hey, and with that, thank you all so much for taking the time out of your day to tune in to today's episode of The Author's Lounge with Mr. Andy Ross. Hey, don't forget to please check the bio, check the description of this video, and also any platform that you're listening to this on. It's going to have his information on how to reach him. And that's all we got for you. So you all take care. Have a wonderful remainder of your day, and I'll catch you next time.